Hello and welcome to The Diverse Bookshelf with me, Samia Aziz. On this show, I interview incredible authors doing a deep dive into important themes and issues while talking all things books. One of the strongest debut novels I read in 2022 was definitely Tomorrow I Become a Woman by Aiwanose Odafen. It's a heart-wrenching tale set in Nigeria of family, womanhood, friendship, and love. I think Aiwanose writes brilliantly and has given us a beautiful novel forcing us to reflect on the lives of women everywhere, the decisions we make, and the systems of power and oppression we live under. I am thrilled that she's my guest today. Aiwanose was born in Lagos, Nigeria. As a high school student, she was a gold and silver medalist in the National Mathematics Olympiad competition. She graduated top of her class with a first-class degree in accounting and is certified with the Association of Chartered Accountants in the UK. She holds an MBA from the Said Business School, University of Oxford, and was the youngest graduate in her class at 21. Prior to becoming a writer, she worked as a consultant across industries, most recently in the public health sector with an international NGO helping to save lives. She has contributed to published non-fiction works and participated in Chimamanda Adichie's Purple Hibiscus Trust Writing Workshop. She was longlisted for the 2020 Commonwealth Writers' Short Story Prize. Tomorrow I Become a Woman is her first novel, which is out in paperback in March 2023. Hi, Aiwanose. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm so excited to talk about your wonderful book, Tomorrow I Become a Woman, and just to get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And I think Tomorrow I Become a Woman is one of the strongest debuts that I have read recently. And it filled me with rage, but also left me with so much to think about and introduced us to some absolutely brilliant characters. And you really explore some important themes, obviously within Nigerian context, but a lot that I feel is universal around the world and to families and people everywhere. So for anyone listening that isn't familiar with your novel, please, can you introduce it?
Oh, yeah. My debut novel is titled Tomorrow I Become a Woman. It begins in 1978, where we have Uju. He's a final year university student, and she meets Gozie, who is the perfect man. He's tall, he's handsome, he sings perfectly, and he's Igbo. Is from which is a tribe in Nigeria, which makes him the perfect man, And so when she meets him, she's so excited, and when he proposes to her within a very short time, she says yes, even though she has lingering feelings for someone else, Akin, who's from a totally different tribe, who her mother wouldn't approve of. And so that begins the story of her life over the next 20 years and the lives of her friends as well, in a very tumultuous relationship, and also like struggling to keep up with societal expectations in the midst of a lot of cultural and societal changes and political turmoil in Nigeria. Yeah. So it's a story of love, of friendship, of determination, and strength actually, and war as well.
Yeah, lots of things. And it's such a great introduction, really. I think it sums up what the book is about, obviously, without giving away too much. So where did the story for you, where did it begin in your mind?
In my mind. So actually, I think I should give a bit of background as to why I started writing this. A friend of mine was going through a situation, and it was hell, literally, and I was trying to help, and I spoke to a friend about it, and I started hearing the usual cultural speak, especially if you're from a very traditional or religious background. I'm sure you can relate as well.
Absolutely.
And I remember I told him I'm going to write about this. I was so annoyed I wanted to write about this. So for me, it started, the first scene in my head, actually, the real, it was like a day before their wedding. That was the first draft. And then basically, and then it flashes back in time to when they meet in church. And which because someone else I know who's also been through a similar situation, they met in church. A lot of it's a this is the perfect place to meet someone. Like if you're from a background like mine,
Yeah.
And so that's why it is. So yeah, that's how it started for me. Like I just pictured it perfectly. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense in the sense that the novel is so kind of apologetically emotional, and like all the emotions that the characters feel come across so strongly. And I feel to understand that you yourself had a personal experience, or like someone that kind of helps it make a little bit more sense as to how, because it's a lived experience. And actually for you writing it, you came at it with a point of frustration and a point of rage and hurt, which is really, really nice to hear. And before we kind of delve into some of the themes and stuff, I want to talk about the title, which is Tomorrow I Become a Woman.
Yeah.
Now, I love it. Like when I picked it up, I obviously wasn't sure like what it was going to be about. I was like, maybe it's going to be about a woman getting married, or maybe it's going to be about a woman having children. And kind of as the book went on, for me, it became about this idea that we are constantly chasing things in our lives as women, like getting married, like when we're young, like having our period, then getting married, then having children. And it feels like these are all milestones that we have to continue to achieve in order to become a woman or to be a woman. And there so many of them are imposed by society, they're imposed by patriarchy. They don't actually care about our well-being or our happiness, as we see so strongly in the book. So for me, it felt like the tomorrow that never really comes. Like we're always talking about tomorrow, we're never focusing on today. And it's all about what it means to be a woman in society, and how actually that isn't even anything that we necessarily feel ourselves, but it's imposed on us, and we're caught up in all these structures. Now that's my view, and I can see you nodding your head. But for you, like, what do you think? Why did you choose that title, and where does it come from for you?
You explained it perfectly. That's why I'm like, because I'm nodding, right? Literally that. So I remember when I said the very first thing in my head was the day before the wedding. And so the first draft I had of this novel was basically Uju a day before her wedding and saying, tomorrow I become a woman. At least that's what Mama says. And I remember when I was editing and I had to take that out and I had to rewrite a lot of places. I remember like going back to that, and I was like, this is the title. And I've had different opinions of this. I feel like they don't like the title, some like they like it, kind of get it, but exactly what you said is exactly what I was trying to communicate with that title. A tomorrow that never comes. I think you explained it perfect. I don't know if there's anything for me to add, really, because it's just these milestones. Oh, when you get your menses, you're finally a woman. Oh, when you get married, oh, you're a woman. When you have a child, you're a woman. When you have a male child, now you're a real woman. When just it keeps moving, and then we have a situation where women are literally performing. They're trying to be good enough. Like, why do you have to prove your womanhood? It doesn't make sense, And it was that frustration I felt when I chose this title, like tomorrow that never comes, and then we have a woman just. I know I've seen really painful stories of women saying they don't feel like women because they can't have children or because they don't have their menses. But then why should your womanhood be defined by that? And just create a society where women are just unhappy and permanently trying to meet a goalpost that's forever moving, and that's why that's where the title is from a deep sense of frustration.
And obviously, like throughout the book we see that we just see this constant striving of our characters, all of the women in the characters, trying to fulfill these roles that they believe they have to play, or these things that they have to do in order to be almost like a successful woman. We have this idea that like there's this list of things that you have to achieve, and the more you tick off, almost like the better woman you are, which is, when we say it out loud, it sounds bizarre, but this is actually the lived reality for millions and millions of women around the world. And I would say for all women to some degree, like even women that are, living in, say, like the UK or the US, and they feel less pressured by society to do certain things, but it is still there on some level.
Yes. You can't escape it. It's everywhere, regardless of society. It's everywhere. Yes. Exactly. And definitely. I mean, even in the US, as I've spoken to friends. I remember during the pandemic, there was this article, I think it was in the New York Times, and it was basically following couples at home during the pandemic. I don't know if you ever saw that article, and it was insane. And this is the US, it's like it's supposed to be like the advanced, and basically we had women like leaving meetings to take their children to the toilet, and their partners were literally just chilling, or like a woman that had to quit her like literally close her business, even though her partner was unemployed because she had to take care of her son. Like it was like, I don't know. So it and I'm sure in that woman's mind, the one that had to close her business, like, oh, she's doing this. She's a true, that's what a good woman should do. A good mother should do. She should put her child first. And it's just this thing that everyone feels that pressure. You can't escape it. As long as you're a woman, you can't escape it.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so many like single women, for example, that are not in relationships or not married, there is this constant, very heavy pressure that they feel no matter what they're doing, no matter like how successful they are in their careers, no matter like what incredible people they are, there still seems to be this one thing that makes them also feel, but also others look at them as if like, yeah, but it doesn't matter that you're doing all of that. You're still not married, or you're still, and it's shocking that we impose these ideas on people even today.
Oh yeah, and you're not married, you don't have kids, or why don't you have kids? Oh, she's too focused on her career. She's not lived a balanced life, and you start hearing the word balanced. and it's crazy that it's mostly women that it's applied to balance. Like you don't see like, oh, he's so successful, or how come does he live a balanced life? Like no one is asking that. But for women it's like, oh, you don't have a husband, you're 30 something, and you're not shouldn't you and it's regardless of position in society. Even the most successful, the women that are out there, the women that are achieving the craziest things, that are huge role models, that pressure never disappears. And I think many women have also been outspoken about it, about how they've just felt that pressure to conform,
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that you kind of present us with is this friendship between three women. So we have our main character, Uju, and then we have her two friends that she's known for years. I love reading about female friendships in books. I absolutely love it. Because I know in my own life, like it is my female friends that pick me up when I'm at my lowest, and it's those people that I can turn to for advice that I feel like is without judgment and unconditional love in the way that I don't think exists in the other kinds of relationships that I have in my life. And so, I absolutely loved it. But my criticism of this female friendship is that it didn't provide that sort of non-judgmental space. It didn't provide a saving grace almost for the characters when they were having to make difficult decisions about, we're going through abuse, or I don't really want to get married, but everyone's telling me to get married, or I don't know if I should marry this person. That friendship was still so heavily influenced by society and by the roles and expectations of women. Why did you decide to write about a friendship that was somewhat still skewed?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, I've never had anyone ask me that. Like in that manner. People have said to me, "Oh, that was such a terrible friend." But I think I really wanted to. I also love female friendships. I just want to be clear about that, because it's like, for me, people I can talk to the most, people I can just really open up to are my female friends, and they've, like, my closest friends have been there for me since, like, like it's been like over a decade, well over a decade. And so I really wanted to write about that bond, right? But I also wanted to write reality in that I've come to realize, and I've tried not to judge in that, I've come to realize that for a lot of women, especially when you're brought up in a certain way and you're told to think a certain way, it's hard to come outside of that mental construct, even with your female friends, So I've had female friends that, they grew up very religious. They grew up in a certain way and they were told certain things. So even when I'd go to them for advice, they were really limited by how they were brought up. And because it's if you're told this is how you should think for like most of your life, at a certain point, it's no longer what you want to think. So at what point do you determine what you want to take and think rather, and what you've been told to think? Like, where is the divide? And so it's come a situation where I have friends who I know that regardless of the fact that I know they care about me, I can never approach them with certain things because they're just limited.
Yeah.
And it's not really their fault, right? And that's the situation with the characters in this book, in that we have a character like Ada. It's clear that Ada cares for her friends, right? Like, I mean, even when her husband didn't approve of the fact that Uju was with her parents, she still went and she's like, I have to run before my husband catches me. But then she does that, right? So it shows she cares. Yeah. But then it's like, it's how, and she's the type, it's very clear in the book that she's the type that doesn't question what she's told to do, does what she's told to do, tries to be the perfect woman. So someone like that, in reality, no matter how much they love you, no matter how much they want to help, that limitation is still there.
Yeah.
They can't really step outside of that. And it happens not just in female friendships, but also male friendships as well. Like my friend I was talking about that I told I was going to write this book, right? This was my friend that was like great, wonderful to me all the time, But then when I brought this situation to him, he immediately switched to the religious aspect of him. I started preaching about how, and I was like, yeah, but someone is in a terrible situation. Why should I be caring about these things? Why are you telling me what God has joined together, let no man put asunder, And then I had to challenge him, and then I forced him to rethink these things. But then not everyone is able or self-aware enough to actually rethink how they've been trained to think. And so I think we also need to have grace for this sort of people. So I didn't write this character so that people would be like, oh, they're terrible. But I wanted them to just be human and to actually represent reality and what I've seen and experienced myself.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because I completely see, and I completely got, even while reading it, that the point is that these are very real characters, and you didn't want to create an illusion or create almost like a paradise within what the situation that they were living in, when actually it is so difficult and so hard. And of course, when we are brought up with ideas that have been in existence within our communities for generations, a friendship alone sometimes isn't enough to bring a huge challenge. But I do think that Uju and Ada and their friends, I think there's still a difference in the way they were thinking as compared to their parents, and we see that generational shift. But I guess I think the thing for me was that it felt like Uju had no peace. She had no escape from all the horrible things, because her brothers were somewhat supportive, but also limited in what they could fundamentally do to protect her. Her mother wasn't, and we will talk about that a little bit later. Her mother her mother didn't, and perhaps wasn't able to offer her that protection. And then her friends, I mean, they tried. God knows they tried. But again, and then I guess the only we see a glimmer of hope is with her, what's the word? Her love interest that isn't her husband.
Yes.
who she clearly was besotted with, but because he was from the wrong tribe, essentially, she felt like she could never introduce him to her parents. And this kind of relationship with Akin that we see seems to offer a glimmer of hope, but that also doesn't really doesn't materialize in the way that one would hope. And was that also intentional for you to just kind of keep it without without something solidly happy in her life? Or why did you decide to keep it so difficult for her?
I think because I wanted readers to be uncomfortable. I've had people message me like say stuff like, "Oh my God, you traumatized me." But I really wanted readers to be uncomfortable because I felt, like you said, you felt a lot of anger, and I really wanted readers to go away feeling upset. Because I felt if I'd just tied a bow on a couple of things, but I'm like, okay, nice book, and they're just gone about their day, and I didn't want that. I really wanted readers to feel a sense of, like, what can I do? How can I change this? Like, is there something like this happening around me? Like, why is this? Like, why haven't? I had men as well tell me, "Oh, I never really thought too much about this. Like, it's just something I knew happened, but I didn't think so much about." And that's what I really wanted. I wanted people to think. I wanted people to feel. I wanted people to feel upset. But I also kept acting there as a glimmer of hope, because I'm a true romantic at heart, I promise. And and I really wanted that because like there's so many dark things that happen, on the pages, and I really just wanted a character that readers could see his name pop up and be like, okay, this is going to be like an easy one. It's not going to be too bad, just kind of breathe a bit and just feel, happy and feel, and feel hope. Because I can really and not just for the reader, but even for Uju throughout the book, he's like an anchor. It's like a constant source of hope that, maybe, one day, and so that's why I wrote it that way.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness he was there, because it was a glimmer of hope in that, like, it felt as though he was able to bring her out some of the particularly dark times that she was having. And I think at the back of her mind, she knew that he was there, maybe not as her husband, or maybe not even as her lover, but at least as her friend, and someone that cared for her and that could see kind of, that she was in a difficult situation. But also he understood the choices that she made and why she made them and why she had to make them. And and we see that he's encouraging of her to not let go of her education, but he's like, we can move things around to suit you, because he understood. And I felt that was so, like, great to see that he was wanting her to pursue her education, but also so sensitive to the fact that he knew her life was about to change with her getting married. But one of the characters that is not really a glimmer of hope for Uju in the book is her mother, and I have no doubt that Uju's mother loves her in the way that every mother loves their child. And we see that she has brought her up and she has done her best, and she really wants what's right for her and what's good for her. But we also see her mother take an approach to her daughter that isn't very soft, isn't very understanding. She kind of doesn't encourage her to pursue those choices and decisions that will fundamentally keep her happy or protected. She's driven by what society expects of women with regards to staying married and being a mother and having a son and all of these things. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you about what writing that mother-daughter relationship, what it was like for you, and why you did it. And it was uncomfortable to read at times, definitely. Was it as uncomfortable for you to write it?
Yes, it was very uncomfortable for me to write. And I promise, because people keep asking me this, so I think I should probably clear that I promise my mom isn't like that.
Okay, well, that's good. That's nice to hear.
So yeah, I love you, mommy. So that's not my mom. But really, so I was, so would you, like, like the back of the book says, the back cover says it's inspired by real stories, and real women I know. And one of the women I know who's like been going through a terrible situation for years back, she tried to leave, and then she had her mother literally make her life a living hell until she went back. And so that was the person that inspired Uju's mother's character rather. And you can't say this person doesn't love her daughter, right? As like you said, it's clear, like she's brought her up and everything. But I also really wanted to write that generational divide, because no matter how progressive your parents are, there's always that gap, that generational gap, and there's so many things that, especially for women of the older generation, there's so many things that were expected of them. So I think sometimes I know people tell me, oh, they hate Uju's mom, and I do, and it's like, yes, I don't think she's a saint. I don't think she's like a great character, but then I also feel there's a level of compassion that's also needed for that generation, in that this is how they were brought up, this is how they were told. It's basically, it's all they know. And in their mind, they're trying to help you. Like, I'm helping you. Why are you not listening to me? Trying to help you. I'm trying to make your life better. Especially when you look at her own history in the book. She's put on the back of a bus as a teenager to go meet this man she's never met and get married. She has kids like really early. He's not the best husband, not to give too much away, you know. And so in her mind, and then she has this daughter, and this man just becomes, you know, perfect, an angel. And then she's like, you know, I'm trying to help you. Like, if you stay, if you know, like, I know she keeps telling Uju, like, oh, think about your children, like, would you? And so in her mind, she's helping.
Yeah,
she is helping, you know, and she does love her daughter, but then it's a sort of tough love to her. But and it's reality, because I know friends whose mothers are pretty traditional, and who and you cannot say their mothers don't love them. Like, I've met their mothers, I know their mothers love them. But then their mothers have been brought up to think a certain way. They've been brought up to be a certain, and that limitation can just not suddenly disappear. And not everyone is the kind that, you know, really challenges how they've been brought up, or really tries to say, oh, okay, maybe I should be different. You know, a lot of people just think it's best to conform, and it's created a situation, and a really sad situation, where we have mothers that are basically entrenched in the system, and they're trying to keep this. So I also wanted Uju's mom actually to be a symbol, in the sense that, you know, we talk about patriarchy a lot, and we talk about men, and, you know, but then we also have a lot of women who upholding the system, you know. And I really wanted Uju's mom to represent that, because I remember I was reading an excerpt from a book, and it basically said that where you have a situation, if you have a situation, a system of oppression, where you have a system of oppression where you're able to convince the people that have been oppressed that the system is good, then you have a double level support. So you have the people that are oppressing, keeping the system in place. And we also have the people that have been oppressed that think they should be oppressed, keeping the system in place. So the system is able to stay in place. And so what's happened is a lot of women have been able to they've been able to convince a lot of women, society has been able to convince a lot of women that this is how it should be, this is how certain things should be. And it's for your own good. You're helping yourself when you are like this, you know. And then they now transfer that, and they try to keep everything in place. This is how it should be. Don't shake anything, you know. And so that's why I wrote Uju's mom like that. And yeah, it was very difficult, you know. It was very difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right, she definitely upholds the system of oppression or control, or whatever words we want to use to describe it. Not fully knowingly, I want to say. Like, she's so, as you said, she's so entrenched within the system. The values and the ideas that she has are so, like, intrinsic now to her, that it doesn't occur to her that there is another way of doing things, or that it would be okay to go against it. So yeah, and I mean we see it around the world in lots of different ways, and within patriarchal systems. Obviously you don't talk about this in the book, but for example, the practice of FGM, although is dictated and enforced at, like, not policy, but like a practical level, in terms of, like, deciding whether or not it's going to happen, is actually performed by women a lot of the time, right? It's the village elders, and then it's the mothers convincing their daughters, and it's all of that, and it's women, and it's not because they want to do it, but it's because they believe that this is the right thing to do. And it's so complicated and so messy and really heartbreaking as well to look at it from an outside perspective, or look at it from a different way of thinking. But it is something, as you rightly said, that we need to come with a little bit of grace, a little bit of understanding, and not just kind of shun or be forever angry at women that are going through this or that are somehow upholding these patriarchal structures. Yeah, and I think as well, I have found, like in my own life as well, that the older we get with time, the more we're able to look back at the way that our parents or our grandparents behaved with us with a deeper understanding and also some mercy.
Yes,
and like a gentleness that we couldn't afford to when we were younger, because it felt like, oh my goodness, if you stop me from going to university, my life is going to end. Like there wasn't space at that time to stop back and be like, hold on a minute, this is coming from the fact that my mother has also experienced decades of oppression or hardship. But obviously when you're a little bit older and you're a bit more sensible and maybe things in your own life are a bit calm, you're able to. And I think we see a little bit of that. I think with Uju, I felt like when she was trying to study and she knew that she had this thing with Akin going on, there was like within her like a frustration, and she becomes somewhat resigned to it a little bit later on, and understands that actually no one can really help her because of how messy and complicated everything is.
Yes, definitely. No, yes, definitely. I agree. You said everything. I'm checking on what else to say. And I've gotten older as well. As I've gotten older, I think I'm a bit more understanding and more sympathetic towards my mother. And I realized, like, especially for people like, I don't know, obviously I can't speak to your situation. My mom married really early. And so, like, the older I get, I'm like, oh, she was winging it. Because I get... Because I'm at my age, my mom had like, wait, how old am I now? My mom had like 4 kids. Wait, right? No, like three. And like at my age, right? And I have none. And I keep thinking, how did she do it? And so I have so much more compassion for her, and just so much like wow, yeah, like you did good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so where did you sort of find the inspiration for your characters? I know you've spoken a little bit about some of the women that you know, but obviously you have created a fictional family and you have so how did the characters develop over time? Like, did they come to you somewhat fully formed? Did you know the choices they were going to make? How did it develop for you as a writer?
That's a perfect question. For me, usually this when I'm writing, like the story, like the character decisions come as I write. Does that make sense? So, and then so let me point out certain characters. I think I've already mentioned Uju's mom. Uju was based on someone I know who's a family member, and also my friend's situation as well. Let me see. Uju's uncle, who goes missing during the Nigerian Civil War, was actually inspired by a colleague's grandmother that disappeared during the Civil War. And so basically she walked out and never came back. And I remember listening to her speak about it, and I was like, I really want to write about this. And I want to write about the war. So the characters were inspired by different people, and their decisions. Akin was inspired by someone's lecturer that was just always supportive, always, after she got married, and even when she was like struggling to do her higher level degrees, you're just always supportive throughout until she got her PhD. And so that was who inspired Akin. There was no love story there in real life, unfortunately, but I wanted a love story. But then the decisions kind of came to me as I went. I feel like I had an outline in that I knew how I wanted. I knew what would happen in Uju and Gozie's situation from beginning to end. Like I knew certain things, but then for the other characters, kind of came as it went. With Uju, with Ada. No, sorry, not with Uju. Sorry, with Ada, for example, and Chinelo. For Chinelo, I really wanted a character who's somewhere in between. she's not Uju, she's not Ada, but she's just the happy-go-lucky person in between, And I really wanted someone like that who's also a victim sort of society and of societal pressure. And I think that was the most painful part to write. That was the most Chinelo's story was the most painful to write. I cried while writing it. It was really heavy. So I'm not answering your question. I want to just make sure I'm not just rambling.
Yeah, you are. That's really great, yeah.
And let me see, who else? Give me another character. For Uju's brothers. Yeah. Uju's brothers, also slightly based on a real situation where like brothers had a meeting with a man that was beating his wife, and they kind of beat him up. And
good. Well done. And what about Gozi?
So also loosely based on different people I know. Yeah.
Okay. A mixture of people.
A mixture of people. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Is there any character or characters that you see yourself reflected in, or like, that are part, like, similar to you?
Oh yes, definitely. Uju. I've never been married, so but because I've had someone ask me like, "Just story your story," and I'm like, I'm too young for that. So I'm sorry, but no, but in all seriousness, I connect to Uju a lot in that Uju's a very questioning character, and that's kind of how I've always been. Like growing up, I was always the one that was like, why? Like when people like, oh, you have to do this, oh, because you're a girl. Because I'm like, why? Like I was always like, why? And then people would talk down to me, and people would say like really mean stuff, or about how I wasn't like a real girl, and I didn't act like a girl, and how I just very sexist statements, and have lecturers like the part of the story that the teachers beat the male students for allowing Uju to pass them. That actually happened to me in school. So like the teachers actually call, like it happened multiple times. Teachers would like call out the male students and be like, "How would you allow a girl pass you?" And then they'll punish them. So just things like that, right? But I really connect with you. I remember my very good friend read the first draft, and she was like, "Uju sounds a lot like you." So definitely Uju, definitely.
Yeah, and Uju's uncle, who goes missing in the war. Now, what I found the most fascinating about him as a character was that obviously we have these kind of clues as to what may or may not have happened. We live in hope that he was throughout the book was that he's still alive somewhere, that they're going to be reunited. But throughout the book, he was portrayed as like the perfect person. I wonder if that is an exploration of how easy it is to romanticize the idea of somebody, especially a man, when they're not actually there. And, like we see Uju struggle also with coming to terms with some of the difficulties that she finds out about her own father, for example. Like she believes him to be this amazing role model. And then when her mother tells her stories, she almost doesn't want to believe that it's the case and all of that. But with her uncle, he remains throughout this incredible character that we just think, oh my God, this man is amazing. The reality is, had we met him and had we seen him in everyday life, everybody is flawed. So we don't know what kind of person he would have been, but he is so romanticized. What was behind that?
Exactly. So we have a habit as human beings, of idolizing people that are in there, and also we kind of also we turn people into saints when they disappear from our everyday lives, because we have this memory of them that's sort of fixed. And it's like, oh my God, like, I mean, a very perfect example of this is Princess Diana, right? Like everyone talked like she was the people's princess. She was so perfect, but she was human. She had her flaws as well. Like she was a wonderful, wonderful person, but then she was human. that was the inspiration for me in writing Uncle Ikena. That, you know, he's this character, especially as a man. Like, you see, Uju loves her dad as well. And then when she finds out, like, he's not perfect, you know. I think, I don't know if I can speak for every girl, but for a lot of girls growing up, if you're like a big daddy's girl, I was a big daddy's girl growing up. When you grow up and then you realize my dad is imperfect, it's a shift. It's like, whoa. It's like, you know, and then you realize your father is human. It's a moment in your life where you, like a switch is flipped on. And I think I think for Uju that never really happens for Uncle Ikena, because he's not there, and because he's just this, and even in a way for Uju's mom as well, because you could see that she was projecting a lot of her feelings for her missing brother towards Gozie, you know. He's just like Ikena. Ikena would love him, this and that, you know. Ignoring the evidence in front of her eyes. And it happens in many situations as well in real life, where people just like, oh no, but this person is this and that, you know, and he's just like his father, he's just like, you know, and then you brush off you, because humans, we are sentimental, and you know, and I mean, we are humans.
Yeah. And I do think sometimes we romanticize or we idealize certain people, certain times in our lives as well, also as a form to protect ourselves, form of self-protection, right? Like, we don't want to think that actually that time was actually really hard, or that person actually wasn't that great. It's a way to protect ourselves and protect our like past, or give us hope that, like, you know, we at least this time, or this person was great. So absolutely, I definitely agree with you. So as a writer, who's really inspired you along the way, from, you know, like when you were a lot younger to writing the book? Who are your key inspirations?
As growing up, I liked a lot of authors, but I think from the Western point of view, it's very different from what I write, but I was such a huge fan of Jane Austen. I was obsessed with Jane Austen. Yes, oh my God, I was obsessed with Jane Austen growing up. I can remember my dad, at a point, I kept disturbing my dad to buy me books. And when he had bought, at a point, he was like, listen, like, how are you finishing this book so fast? And he's like, leave me alone. And then I transferred my harassment to the librarian at my school. And I was always like, yeah, do you have this book? And she's like, don't you have schoolwork? and you know, but also, like, from an African point of view, Chinua Achebe, Buchi Emecheta. I think Buchi Emecheta's Joys of Motherhood. I don't know if you know this book, but a lot of Nigerians, Buchi Emecheta's Joys of Motherhood, for me, it was a major turning point in my life, because I remember I was 13, and we had to read it for school, and I read it, and I was like, I got to the end, and I was like, where's the joy? I was so annoyed, and I remember I never forgot how I felt, and I told myself, this will not be me. I swore to myself, I was like, this will not be me. And it was really a major turning point in my life. And in writing Tomorrow I Become a Woman, I really wanted to leave other people that feeling, that annoyance I felt, because I was so annoyed at the end of Joys of Motherhood. Like, because I was like, oh, the title is Joys of Motherhood. There'll be something at the end to make me happy. And the end was not, was nothing at all. And so for me, yes, I think, and then also with more recent African authors, I think for a lot of Nigerian authors, when Purple Hibiscus came out, it was such a big moment for like younger Nigerians. It was like, wow, like, oh my God. And then we had like, you know, Half of a Yellow Sun. And then also I was at the Purple Hibiscus workshop, which she coordinated, and, you know, what's the word? So the word disappeared. But anyways, so yeah, definitely. She ran it. Chimama. No. I was talking about the word for, like, she coordinated the workshop, and like. Oh, okay. Yeah, she was very active, and you know, so she gave a lot of great advice at the workshop about so for those who don't realize what I'm talking about, it's about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So her writing definitely was like very inspirational for a lot of young Nigerian writers growing up. I will not comment about anything else.
I mean, I'm very curious. What was it about Jane Austen that you liked so much?
I think, as if you want to be honest, like when we're colonized by the British, right? So
Yeah.
like growing up, like all these books that were like, oh, tea parties and and dressing up and like that age of of people speaking in certain accents and being all posh, and so it was like kind of like, so it was just fascinating,
Yeah.
and then the love stories as well, the intrigue, like, oh, who is she, who will she end up with, so that was it. Like it was just, but like it was an escape. It was just because it was a world that I couldn't see. Like it was just this world that was so foreign to me.
I actually have really similar views of reading Jane Austen, especially as a young, like as a child, because although like I was living and I was born and brought up in the UK in London, but my experience of being in London and being in the UK was so far removed from like dance balls and fancy gowns and and like horse and carriage. And the thing is I don't even think that because I do believe that also was a part of British society at the time. It wasn't, everyone wasn't living in that way, right? But for me, it definitely, it felt, and even to this day, like if I'm feeling like I just need something where I can just forget everything, I will very happily put on Pride and Prejudice on TV, on Netflix, because I'll be like, oh my goodness, this is not life. Like this is
exactly. I recently, oh my god, last year, just before the end of the year, I was feeling like stressed, and I was like, because I moved here, so I ordered like a complete collection of Jane Austen's, like like the book is like this big.
It must be huge.
Yeah, but I was just like, you know what, I just need to this isn't life,
Yeah. And I do, like, I think when I was younger as well, like I liked the writing style because I found it to be like flowery and poetic, but it felt in some ways non-serious. Like it felt kind of like it, like it was a play, or like it was a bit theatrical. Like that has always been my attitude towards it and how I felt about it, and my views haven't changed.
Me too.
So if everyone, there's always conversations about like, oh, should we still be learning the classics at school in the UK? Like, should people still be reading Jane Austen? And I just think, because it's a type of writing. Like, explore it as a piece of writing. Like, you don't need to explore it as a representation of society, but just for the sheer reading experience and the fact that it is so detached from real life, just do it. Like, it's great.
Yes, and also like it's really good writing.
Yeah,
like it is. Like, I mean, like it just engages you and just keeps you, and you just enjoy it. I personally feel we should read the classics, but then, like, of course there's some that can be cut out because of various reasons. But if we're talking like Jane Austen, like the language, just even like those were like the earliest like introduction to just really good writing that just really engages you and just really just keeps you entertained.
Like for me, I don't read Jane Austen for any commentary on women's roles in society. I feel like who cares? Like now in 2022, we shouldn't be looking to how she was reviewing society at the time. Like, we don't even need to be having that conversation anymore. It's just joyful.
I feel we shouldn't get so caught up in obviously in activism and what we're trying to do, and just forget to just have fun and be happy. Like it's also a different time. Like it's ridiculous to impose certain things on she wrote even considering the time she did then, what she wrote was actually quite progressive for her time as well, So so can we just enjoy things? Like that's how I see it. And that's how I see it. Like criticism is allowed and everything else, but
and it's healthy,
and it's healthy, but let's just enjoy it.
So as a writer, what do you hope to achieve? What is it that you want to achieve?
That's a great question, and a deep one. I want people to go away thinking. I want people to feel. Generally, when I write, because like you mentioned, my work is so emotional, and even what I'm like working on now and just other things, generally my work is quite emotional. I want people to think. I want people to feel. I want people to go away. For me, the greatest insult will be, "Oh, that was okay," and then dropping the book and moving on. Like that's that's the greatest insult. Like you didn't like, "Oh, okay," like you don't think about it. You're not bothered about it. Even if you hate me and you're like, "That was so annoying." Like it's something. You feel something. I think that's what every writing should aim to do, to make the reader feel, the reader think. Also another aim for me is to put a mirror up to society, especially for women, to ask society, is this okay? Are you cool with this? And not just society, but also religious institutions as well. Coming from a Christian background, I was brought up Christian. I'm Christian, and and it's one of the reasons. Like people ask me, like, why? How come there's like you really say this about like the church takes such a front role in your novel? And I'm like, yes, because it's reality, and I want the church to be like, is this okay?
Yeah.
Is this okay?
Yeah, that's so great. And actually, on the things that you explore and the emotions, one of the things that you write, that really comes out is this concept of shame. Where, like, can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, why is shame still such a big part of how we feel and how we behave, and why is it the thing that we try and run away from?
Because it's how we're conditioned, right? Like, so because we're such we're such societal beings that how we've been conditioned, and how society punishes you is by making you feel ashamed, making you feel shame. Like if we can make this person feel shame, then we've for their choices, then we've successfully punished them. And throughout the book, everyone tries to do, or what society basically tries to do, is to shame, like to say, oh, what will people think? How will people react? Like because you want to look good, you want everyone to think of you in a positive way, And I've always seen that it's a tool of oppression. When you get to the point where people can no longer shame you for your choices, people cannot make you feel bad that, oh, I'm not doing this because it's at the level of freedom you experience that is so, it's exhilarating. And I really want people, and I really want readers to get to read this and feel like, oh, and actually question, because even for me, in writing this, there were so many, it's true, I've always felt shame about this. I've always been taught to feel shame about this. I remember growing up, I couldn't cook initially when I was like, I was like still a teenager, like 13. And because my mom didn't believe in girls cooking until they were like 16, right? But then that's like an anomaly where I'm from, because from like 8, 9, 10, everyone is already in the kitchen and stuff. So like my mom would allow me like do stuff, but then just don't touch anything fire. Thank you. God bless you. Move away. And I remember once in school, I mentioned it, and a classmate said, oh, what are you going to give your husband to eat when you get married? Books. And I felt really bad. I felt so ashamed. And I'll never forget that feeling. I felt so ashamed. And I went home and I told my mom, like, oh, someone said, that I can't cook, and what am I going to give? And the mom was like, how old are you? Why should you be thinking about stuff like that, right? Exactly. But then I felt a lot like, but then that's what happens, when it's little things like this throughout your life that shape you and shape. Because imagine if imagine if I'd gone home and my mom had been like, oh yeah, you should be ashamed that you can't cook at this age, and then start, but then I now grew up really just absorbing everything people say to me, really just feeling shame at every slight towards my womanhood, That's what happens, literally. Oh, you don't have children. Oh, you're not married. And you see when Chinelo finally gets married, she says, God has taken away my shame. Like, why? Yeah. Why is it something to be ashamed of? Yeah. Yeah. It's a tool of oppression. It's how you're made to conform. If they're successfully able to make you feel shame, they've won. They've won.
Wow. I have considered shame always to be like a personal reflection and like something that comes from within us. I have never thought about it really as a tool of oppression, which actually it is. It's because it's the thing that we don't want to feel. And because what it's tied into our self-worth and our kind of like own markers of like how well we're doing in life, or whether essentially, and especially when you throw faith into it, then it becomes even more complicated, because then it's about morality and good and bad. And if we start building on those things and we start kind of like hammering away at them when we're children, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds as we grow up, by the time we're adults, we're so afraid of this feeling of shame. We're willing to almost do anything to avoid it. Wow, that's very powerful. I have loved speaking to you, but I would love to know, what are you working on? Can you share details of what you're working on next? What can we expect from you? I cannot wait to pick up another book by you. Do we get a sequel? What's going on? Please tell me.
Thank you. By the way, I've also enjoyed this. Like, I've just been laughing.
Thank you. It's been so great.
Actually, so I'm working on a follow-up novel to Tomorrow I Become a Woman. So it basically follows Ego, Zina, and Erife. There's the three daughters of the three women in Tomorrow I Become a Woman.
Yes, there's a sequel.
And so, but it's very different in that it's more modern. So it's set in a more modern world, and the purpose is to explore the trauma they've experienced as a result of their mother's decisions. How their mother's decisions have influenced their own decisions. How, so it's so many things. Also the political turmoil, because I love politics in that I feel we're all political beings.
Yeah.
Even those of us that like to pretend we don't see politics, we are all political beings. Like,
yeah. So
there's a lot of politics in it as well, and a lot of Nigerian politics, and I'm excited about it. I do. I hope people like whenever I don't. There's no date yet, but yeah. So I'm currently in the edit phase, like going through sentence by sentence. That's like the slow and hard part. Like
But like that means that it's largely like, as in the crux of it is done. It's now kind of like you've written it. You've written.
Yes, I have a draft.
that's very exciting. Honestly, I can't wait. And like I can imagine it's going to be very different, probably also difficult to read in parts and probably rage-inducing. But it is the next generation, isn't it? So it will be interesting, really interesting to see how it's different, if at all, but I'm sure it will be, but exactly how, I'm not sure. But thank you once again for your time today. Honestly, it has been such a pleasure, and I hope that more people pick up Tomorrow I Become a Woman, and I eagerly await for the release of its sequel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really had such a lovely time. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Aiwanose for such a fun, insightful, and wonderful conversation. I learned so much, and I loved every moment of speaking to her, and I hope that you all did too. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow the Diverse Bookshelf on your podcast platform of choice and connect with me on social media. I would really appreciate it if you could rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the podcast.